Restoring the Alton Towers Bookworm, our biggest project to date and one that was nearly complete. An iconic piece of theme park history was nearly looking as good as new. But there was still some work to be done on the restoration of the head. To get to this stage of the project, we'd certainly come a long way. Building a new framework and starting to repair the body was the first task, followed by building up various layers of fiberglass and filler to complete the body again. It's a project that me and my dad had worked on for over a month. Over 200 hours of labour had gone into the project, but as each and every week went by, the bookworm was looking better and better each time. One of the most important parts of the project for me was learning a new set of skills from my dad. From learning how to mix filler and apply fiberglass to using various different tools. These are memories that I'll cherish for a lifetime, and I know that it'll be a project that I'll never forget. The final part of the restoration process was to work on the bookworm's head. After previously fixing the broken skin and replacing parts of it with fiberglass, now it was time to add the finishing touches.
Before the new eye lenses were fitted into place, we had to touch in some of the paintwork on the eyeballs. We used both black and white paints to do this with a small touch-up brush.
The new Perspex lenses were held in place using the same clear sealer that we had used on the glasses and spyglass. We then smoothed the sealer around the edge using our fingers to create a good finish.
At this point, we had installed the new eye lenses and were ready to start work on the next stage. This would involve using masking tape to cover the new eye lenses and stop them getting damaged whilst we spray painted the rest of the head.
We then used a specialist spray paint that we knew would stick to both the rubber and the fiberglass. This was a relatively easy process compared to the original repair work we did on the head. It was important to make sure that it all had a thin coat of paint first, allowing a few minutes to dry before going over again with a second coat.
Before the paint had fully dried, we removed the masking tape from the eye lenses. It was best to remove the masking tape before it was dry so that the paint edges wouldn't peel up when removing the tape.
Once the spray paint had fully dried, it was time to add more detail onto the face. I started by painting pink back into the mouth area. By this point, the head was looking much better than it was previously, especially as a huge part of it was originally damaged. One of my favourite details on the face was the pink lines around the nose. Over its time at Alton Towers, these had faded away. However, as part of the work, I definitely wanted to add them back in. I used the same pink paint along with dabbing a fine brush to get the effect that I wanted.
The next stage was to attach the repaired glasses onto the face. These were held into place by various different screws, making them very easy to attach.
After adding the finishing touches to the head, the work was nearly complete. The final part of this process was to fit the freshly painted hat back onto the head. The hat easily screws onto the brackets that are located inside the head.
Finally, after many weeks of hard work, the final stage of this huge project was complete. We'd worked on various different stages, and at times we thought it may not be possible to complete this mammoth project to the highest possible standard.
Ever since my parents first took me to Alton Towers in the mid-1990s, I've always been fascinated by the park. And I've seen various different rides, themed areas, and even owners come and go across the years. But one of the biggest memories of mine from when I was a kid was exploring Storybook Land. Whether it was riding around on the Squirrel Nutty, watching the various different ice shows in the arena, or dazing for hours at the Bookworm, it'll always be a big memory from my childhood. Alton Towers in the mid-1990s and throughout the early 2000s just had a special, magical feel about it. It was clear that so much loving care and attention had gone into each and every project, from a relaxing boat trip on Toyland tours to the terror inside the original haunted house. Each ride and attraction was completed to the highest standard. That included the whole of Storybook Land, but especially the Bookworm. As the years went on and the park passed through various different ownership changes, the magic started to disappear and areas such as Storybook Land were left to fall into decay. When I found the Bookworm laying on the floor, I knew that somehow I had to save it and bring this huge part of not just my childhood, but millions of others back into a pristine condition. But once I had the Bookworm, it would become a huge task to repair, and one that we would only take on the challenge of completing over 6 years after me first having him. After a month of hard work and over 200 labour hours and at a cost of over £600, it was finally ready, and the Storybook Land Bookworm was about to become part of an epic new adventure.
Could have been a wonderful dancer, you know. I had everything. Looks, rhythm, even a free pink tutu. Only one thing held me back, you know.
This has been a major challenge for me and Sean, one that we didn't know if we would be able to complete. But as you can see, the finished outcome is way beyond our initial expectations.
When I was a kid and I stood in Storybook Land, never did I think the day would come that I'd have to rescue a piece of my childhood. But that day came, and finally in 2020, me and my dad worked as a great team to restore an iconic piece of theme park history. But there's more to this story. After working hard to retain as much of the original features as possible, we later discovered that some of the mechanisms were still in place to make the bookworm's eyes and eyelids move. A future project will include installing new motors that will make his eyes move once again, along with adding a push button to start a show that will include the original audio. You may wonder if you'll ever be able to see the bookworm in person again. Well, that's the next chapter of this fascinating story. Besides, you don't think we'd do all of this work for us just to enjoy it in our garden, do you?
Tell him I sent you and he'll give you your very own tractor to ride on. His oodles of scrum cuddlesome little animals, and he doesn't mind a bit if you want to join in. Well, off you go. You know, Peter, with all his friends, such a naughty little rabbit sometimes. But what a dancer, what a skater, so talented. I could have been a wonderful dancer, you know. I had everything.